On Christmas Eve, Alexandra had promised herself she would finally feel normal again. The downtown restaurant glowed with fairy lights, couples laughing under garlands while carols floated through the air. She smoothed her red dress over the edge of her wheelchair and checked her dating app one last time. Oliver had written that he did not care she was disabled, but when he saw her, his smile vanished. His eyes flicked to the chair, and he turned away as the door closed behind him. A little girl at the next table tugged her single dad's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, she's crying." Outside the restaurant windows, snow drifted down like powdered sugar, coating the sidewalks and the shoulders of couples walking arm in arm. Christmas lights stretched between lampposts, casting ribbons of gold and red across the frosted glass. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang out their evening hymn, and the faint melody of carolers harmonized with the wind. It was the kind of night that belonged on greeting cards. The kind of night that made loneliness feel like a personal failure. Inside, the restaurant hummed with warmth and laughter. Candles flickered on white tablecloths. Wreaths of holly and pine decorated the walls. A piano player in the corner coaxed soft carols from ivory keys, and waiters in crisp aprons glided between tables carrying plates of roasted duck and glasses of mulled wine. Every seat seemed occupied by happiness, by families toasting to another year together, by lovers stealing kisses beneath sprigs of mistletoe. Every seat except one. Alexandra Constance Moore sat alone at a table for two, her untouched glass of sparkling water catching the candlelight. She was 31 years old, with pale skin and eyes the color of winter sky, that particular shade of blue-gray that seemed to hold both storms and stillness. Her blonde hair fell in careful waves past her shoulders, styled with the kind of attention that spoke of hours spent preparing, of hope carefully cultivated like a fragile flower. She wore a red velvet dress with a modest neckline, elegant and festive, the hem falling just below her knees where it met the frame of her wheelchair. The wheelchair was sleek and modern, its chrome accents polished to a mirror shine. She had chosen it specifically because it looked less medical, more intentional, as though mobility were a design choice rather than a necessity. But no amount of polishing could change what it represented. No amount of careful styling could erase the way people's eyes dropped to its wheels before they ever met her gaze. She checked her phone again. The last message from Oliver Grant still glowed on the screen. Sent 3 hours ago. "Can't wait to finally meet you. I don't care about the wheelchair. I care about your heart." The words had made her cry when she first read them. Now they felt like evidence in a trial she was losing. 2 tables away, Henry Carter Wells was trying to convince his 7-year-old daughter that green beans were not, in fact, a punishment. He was 36, broad-shouldered and weathered in the way of men who worked with their hands. His brown hair perpetually slightly disheveled no matter how many times he ran his fingers through it. His eyes were warm and brown, the kind that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, though tonight they carried shadows of exhaustion that even Christmas Eve could not fully dispel. "But Daddy," Bonnie protested, pushing the offending vegetables around her plate with theatrical disgust. "It's Christmas. Santa wouldn't want me to eat green beans on Christmas." Henry bit back a laugh. "Actually, Santa specifically mentioned green beans in his letter. Said he won't visit houses where kids don't eat their vegetables." Bonnie's eyes widened with suspicion. "You're making that up. Would I lie about Santa?" Henry pressed his hand to his chest in mock offense. "On Christmas Eve." Bonnie considered this, her small face scrunched in concentration. She had her mother's coloring, that same strawberry blonde hair she insisted on wearing in 2 ponytails tied with red ribbons, those same round cheeks that flushed pink when she laughed. Looking at her was like looking at a photograph come to life, a bittersweet reminder of the woman who was no longer there to share these moments. It was Bonnie who first noticed the woman in the wheelchair. She had been watching the door, hoping to catch a glimpse of Santa even though she knew. In that way, children know things they are not supposed to know yet, that he probably was not real. Instead, she saw a man walk in, scan the room, and walk right back out again. Then she saw the woman he had been looking at crumple like paper in rain. "Daddy," Bonnie whispered, tugging at Henry's sleeve. "That lady is crying." 3 years ago, Alexandra Moore had been a different person entirely. She had been a rising star at a boutique design firm, the kind of woman who ran marathons for charity on weekends and hosted dinner parties in her carefully curated apartment. She had friends who texted her constantly, a boyfriend who talked about engagement rings, a life that felt solid and bright and full of forward momentum. Then came the night that split her existence into before and after. It had been raining. She remembered that much. A late night at the office, celebrating a successful pitch, too much coffee and not enough caution on slick roads. She did not remember the accident itself, only the aftermath. The hospital ceiling tiles, stark and white and infinite. The antiseptic smell that seemed to seep into her pores, the way her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, like static on a television that would not tune to the right channel. The doctors used words like spinal cord injury and incomplete paralysis and rehabilitation potential. Her boyfriend, Marcus, used words like together and forever and we'll get through this. But words, Alexandra learned, were cheap currency. They could be spent without meaning, withdrawn without notice. Marcus lasted 3 months. He came to fewer and fewer physical therapy sessions, found more and more reasons to work late, until finally he stood in her hospital room doorway and said the words she had been dreading. "I'm not strong enough for this. I'm sorry." Then he was gone, and Alexandra was left to rebuild herself alone. Her friends followed a similar trajectory. At first, there were flowers and cards and promises to visit. Then the invitations stopped coming. "The restaurant doesn't have a ramp." "The club is so crowded you'd hate it." "We didn't want to make you feel bad." Each excuse was a small death, a quiet confirmation that she no longer fit into the life she had built. Learning to navigate the world from a seated position was like learning to speak a new language in a country where everyone else was fluent. There were the practical challenges, transferring from bed to chair, finding clothes that were both attractive and functional, memorizing which subway stations had elevators and which were inaccessible monuments to able-bodied indifference. But harder than the physical adjustments was the constant weight of other people's perceptions. She learned to recognize the different types of looks, the pity look, soft and condescending, as though she were a wounded animal, the curiosity look, openly staring at the mechanics of her chair, the avoidance look, eyes sliding away as though disability were contagious, and worst of all, the brave look, that particular expression people wore when they wanted credit for interacting with her at all. The dating apps had been a last resort, a desperate attempt to believe that romance was still possible for someone like her. She had written her profile with brutal honesty. "I'm a wheelchair user. I design beautiful things. I'm trying to remember I'm allowed to be loved." Most men disappeared after reading it. Some fetishized her disability in ways that made her skin crawl. But Oliver had seemed different. Oliver had asked about her work, her dreams, her favorite books. Oliver had said all the right things. Until tonight. When the restaurant door opened and Oliver walked in, Alexandra's heart had lifted like a helium balloon. He looked exactly like his photos. Tall and handsome in a charcoal wool coat, a small gift-wrapped box in his hand. She lifted her arm to wave, her smile genuine and hopeful for the first time in months. His eyes found her immediately. For one suspended moment, they held her gaze, and she saw something flicker there, something that might have been possibility. Then his focus dropped. She watched it happen in slow motion, the way his attention traveled down past her face, past her carefully chosen dress, past the table edge, to the wheels that announced her differentness before she could speak a single word. The change was instantaneous. His smile collapsed. His shoulders stiffened. He pulled out his phone as though receiving an urgent message, turned toward the door, and simply walked out. No explanation. No goodbye. No acknowledgement that she was a person who deserved at least the courtesy of rejection to her face. Alexandra sat frozen, her hand still half raised in a wave that would never be returned. Around her, the restaurant continued its cheerful hum, oblivious to her small devastation. Couples laughed, wine was poured, Christmas carols played on, and she sat alone at a table set for two, watching the door like it might apologize on Oliver's behalf. 1 minute passed, then 3, then 5. She knew he was not coming back. She had known it the moment his eyes found her wheels. But hope was a stubborn creature that died in increments rather than all at once. When she finally lowered her hand, she found it was shaking. The tears came without permission, spilling down her cheeks and landing in her untouched water glass. She fumbled for a napkin, trying to be discreet, trying to shrink herself into invisibility. But grief does not care about discretion. Grief only knows how to overflow. Henry Wells understood something about loss that most people preferred not to learn. His wife, Vivian, had been the kind of woman who collected happiness like other people collected stamps. She had a laugh that could fill a room, a talent for making everyone feel welcome, a way of turning ordinary moments into memories worth keeping. She had also had a heart defect that no one knew about until it was too late. The doctor said it was an anomaly, something that could have happened at any time. Henry remembered very little of those days, except the weight of Bonnie in his arms. The way his 3-year-old daughter kept asking when Mommy was coming home. The terrible task of explaining forever to someone who still believed in Santa Claus. The years since had been a patchwork of survival. He learned to braid hair from watching tutorial videos at 2 a.m. He learned which frozen dinners Bonnie would actually eat and which would be fed to the neighbor's dog. He learned to be both father and mother, protector and comforter, disciplinarian and best friend. It was exhausting, isolating, and more rewarding than anything he had ever accomplished at work. Tonight's dinner was a tradition he had started the first Christmas without Vivian. He could not afford much, but he could afford one nice meal at one nice restaurant. A few hours where they pretended to be a family that was not missing its center. Bonnie looked forward to it all year. Henry looked forward to seeing her look forward to it. "Daddy," Bonnie said again, more insistently. "That lady, she's really sad." Henry followed his daughter's gaze to the woman at the corner table. He had noticed her earlier. Hard not to notice someone that beautiful, and had immediately looked away out of respect. Now he saw the tears tracking down her cheeks, the way her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs, the empty chair across from her that told its own story. "I think her friend left," Henry said carefully, not wanting to explain abandonment to a 7-year-old on Christmas Eve. "That's mean." Bonnie's voice carried the absolute moral clarity of childhood. "You shouldn't leave people alone on Christmas." "No," Henry agreed. "You shouldn't." They sat in silence for a moment, both watching the woman struggle to compose herself. Henry thought about all the times he had cried alone in his truck after dropping Bonnie at school, All the nights he had stared at Vivian's empty pillow and wondered how anyone survived this much missing. He thought about how it would have felt to have someone, anyone, simply notice his pain. "Can we help her?" Bonnie asked. Henry hesitated. He did not want to embarrass the woman, did not want to intrude on private grief with clumsy good intentions. But he also remembered what Vivian used to say about Christmas. "It's not about the presents," she would tell anyone who listened. "It's about making sure no one has to feel forgotten." "If you go," he said to Bonnie, "I'll be right behind you, but we have to be polite." "Okay." She might want to be alone. Bonnie slid off her chair with the determination of someone on an important mission. She grabbed the small stuffed bear she had brought with her, a threadbare companion named Mr. Buttons, and marched across the restaurant with more bravery than most adults could muster. Henry followed at a respectful distance, ready to intervene if necessary. Alexandra was so lost in her tears that she did not notice the small figure approaching until a child's voice cut through her misery. "Excuse me," Bonnie said, her head barely clearing the table edge. "Are you okay?" Alexandra looked up, startled to find a little girl in a reindeer sweater staring at her with enormous concerned eyes. She wiped hastily at her face, embarrassed to be caught in such naked vulnerability by a stranger's child. "I'm fine, sweetie. Don't worry about me." Bonnie's expression suggested she did not believe this for a second. "My daddy says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but it's better to be sad with someone than all by yourself." Before Alexandra could respond, Henry arrived, his face a mixture of apology and gentle concern. "I'm so sorry if she's bothering you. We just noticed that your friend left and thought maybe you shouldn't have to sit alone on Christmas Eve. No pressure at all, but if you'd like some company, we'd be honored to share our table." Alexandra's instinct was to refuse. She had spent years building walls against pity, against the well-meaning interference of people who saw her chair before they saw her. But something in this man's voice gave her pause. He was not looking at her with that familiar patronizing softness. He was looking at her like she was simply a person having a hard night, which was exactly what she was. "I don't need charity," she said, her defensive walls rising automatically. Henry nodded as though this were perfectly reasonable. "Good, because I can't afford charity. What I can offer is mediocre conversation and a really strong opinion about whether candy canes are overrated. My daughter thinks they're essential to Christmas. I think they're just peppermint lies. We could use a tiebreaker." Despite everything, Alexandra felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Peppermint lies. They look so pretty. Then you eat one and it's just disappointment and sticky fingers. Bonnie planted her stuffed bear on Alexandra's table with ceremonial gravity. "Mr. Button says you should come sit with us. He's very good at listening. My daddy is too, mostly." Alexandra looked at the ratty stuffed animal, then at the earnest little girl, then at the father who was watching her with patient expectation. She thought about the long taxi ride home to her empty apartment, the Christmas tree she had not bothered to decorate, the evening stretching ahead like a sentence to be served. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but only if you let me pay for dessert." Henry rearranged their table with practical efficiency, moving chairs and adjusting the angle so Alexandra could maneuver her wheelchair into a comfortable position. He asked her which spot she preferred, whether she needed more space, treating her mobility needs as simply logistical rather than tragic. It was such a small thing, being consulted rather than managed. But it loosened something in Alexandra's chest that had been tight for years. "I'm Henry," he said once they were settled. "And this opinionated creature is Bonnie." "I'm 7, Bonnie announced, as though this were a significant accomplishment. "How old are you?" "Bonnie," Henry said with parental exasperation. "We don't ask ladies their age. Why not Because it's... He paused, clearly searching for an explanation that would satisfy a 7-year-old. It's complicated. Alexandra laughed, a real laugh, the first one in what felt like weeks. I'm 31, and I think asking questions is how we learn things, so don't let anyone tell you to stop. Bonnie beamed as though she had just received the highest compliment. I like your dress. You look like Christmas magic. Thank you. I like your sweater. Is that a reindeer? It's Rudolph. He's my favorite because everyone made fun of his nose, but then he saved Christmas anyway. Daddy says that's called overcoming diversity. Adversity, Henry corrected gently. Overcoming adversity. That's what I said. Bonnie was already distracted by the dessert menu. Can I get chocolate cake? Please, please, please. The conversation flowed easier than Alexandra expected. Henry asked about her work, and she found herself pulling up photos of her designs on her phone, explaining how she transformed spaces from sterile to warm, how she believed that beauty was a kind of healing. He listened with genuine interest, asked questions that showed he was paying attention, never once suggested that a woman in a wheelchair should not be doing such physically demanding work. These are incredible, he said, scrolling through images of a children's hospital waiting room she had redesigned. This must be so rewarding. It is when I can forget that most people see the chair before they see the portfolio. She had not meant to say that out loud. It slipped out like a confession, raw and unguarded. But Henry just nodded. I get a version of that, he said. Single dad. People either think I'm a hero for doing basic parenting or they're waiting for me to fail so they can say they knew men couldn't handle it alone. That must be exhausting. Some days. Other days, Bonnie draws me a picture of us as superheroes, and I remember that the people who matter already know who I am. Alexandra felt something shift inside her, some wall loosening its grip. Here was someone who understood what it meant to be seen through a lens you did not choose, to be defined by circumstances rather than character. It was not the same as her experience, but it was close enough to feel like recognition. Bonnie, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, was busy drawing on her napkin with a crayon the waiter had provided. When she finished, she presented her masterpiece with obvious pride. It showed a Christmas tree, a figure in a wheelchair, a tall man, and a small girl with 2 ponytails. Above them, she had written, in crooked letters, "No one alone." That's us, Bonnie explained. Together, so no one has to be lonely. Alexandra stared at the crude drawing, at the way the wheelchair was simply part of the scene rather than its defining feature, at the way she had been included in this child's vision of Christmas without hesitation or qualification. Her eyes burned with a different kind of tears. It's beautiful, she managed. Can I keep it? It's a present, Bonnie said seriously, because Christmas is about presents and not being alone. After dinner, Henry mentioned their tradition of visiting the big Christmas tree in the town square. You're welcome to join us, he said, his tone carefully neutral, leaving space for refusal. Only if you're not sick of us yet. Alexandra thought about the alternative. Going home, sitting in darkness, wondering what was wrong with her that made people leave. Or she could spend a few more hours feeling like she belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was temporary. I'd like that, she said. The square was a wonderland of lights and sound. The giant Christmas tree rose 30 feet into the night sky, its branches laden with ornaments the size of basketballs and thousands of twinkling bulbs that reflected off the freshly fallen snow. An ice skating rink occupied one corner, filled with wobbling children and show-off teenagers. Vendors sold hot cocoa and roasted chestnuts, their carts trailing steam and the smell of cinnamon into the cold air. Henry navigated the crowd with Alexandra's comfort in mind, finding the smoothest paths, pointing out obstacles before they became problems, when they hit a patch of rough cobblestone. He asked if she wanted help before touching her chair, and when she said yes. He pushed steadily without making her feel like cargo. Bonnie danced ahead of them, her breath making small clouds as she exclaimed over every decoration. "Look at that one. It's bigger than my head, Daddy. Take a picture, Alexandra. Do you see the angel on top?" For a few precious minutes, Alexandra forgot to feel self-conscious. She was just a person at a Christmas market, surrounded by beauty and light, listening to a little girl's unfiltered joy. Then she saw Amanda. Amanda Farah Lee had been Alexandra's co-worker in what felt like another lifetime. They had shared lunch breaks and office gossip, celebrated promotions together, called each other friends. After the accident, Amanda had sent flowers and a card, then nothing. "Alexandra? Oh my God." Amanda's voice cut through the crowd noise like a bell. She approached in an expensive coat, her smile too bright, her eyes already doing that familiar drop to the wheelchair. "I'm so proud of you for coming out tonight. After everything you've been through, it's so brave just to leave the house." The words landed like small stones, each one a bruise. Brave. As though existing in public were an act of heroism rather than basic human functioning. As though Alexandra's presence in a crowded square were an accomplishment to be praised rather than a right to be assumed. "Thanks," Alexandra managed, her voice flat. "We should get coffee sometime. Catch up." Amanda was already backing away, her obligation to acknowledge Alexandra's existence fulfilled. "Happy holidays." Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving behind only the echo of her condescension. Henry watched the exchange with a slight frown but did not comment. Alexandra was grateful for his silence even as she felt the familiar walls beginning to rise again. Of course this was temporary. Of course Henry and Bonnie were just being kind because it was Christmas. No one actually wanted to spend time with a woman who needed to be called brave for showing up to her own life. "I need to use the restroom," Alexandra said. The excuse automatic. "I'll be right back." She found a quiet corner near the public facilities, not actually needing to use them, just needing space to breathe. She pressed her palms against her eyes and tried to remember why she had thought tonight could be different. When she started to wheel back toward where she had left Henry and Bonnie, she heard his voice. He was crouched down to Bonnie's level, speaking softly, and the wind carried his words directly to her. "We can't save everyone, Bonnie, but we can at least make sure she's okay tonight." Alexandra froze. Save. The word detonated in her chest like a grenade. She was a project, a Christmas charity case. A sad, disabled woman that a kind man was using to teach his daughter about helping the less fortunate. Every warm feeling from the evening curdled into something bitter. She did not hear the rest of his sentence, did not wait to hear the context. Her hands found the wheels of her chair and began to push before her mind had finished processing. Henry looked up as she approached, his smile faltering when he saw her expression. "Alexandra, is everything okay? I think I should head home." Her voice was ice, her walls fully raised. "Thank you for dinner. I appreciate the charity." "Charity? What are you?" Confusion flickered across his face. "Did we do something wrong if I did? Please tell me. I've had enough pity for a lifetime." She was already turning away, already escaping. "Enjoy your Christmas." "Alexandra, wait." Henry called after her, but she did not stop. Bonnie tugged at her father's hand, her small face crumpled with distress. "Daddy, she thinks we feel sorry for her. That's not why we like her. That's not why at all." Alexandra took the back paths, the quiet routes away from the crowds and the lights. She needed darkness to match her mood, silence to hear her own recriminations. Stupid. Stupid to believe that one dinner could change anything, stupid to let herself hope. The snow was falling harder now, accumulating on the sidewalks and the arms of her chair. The temperature had dropped while she was basking in borrowed warmth, and her thin coat was no match for the bitter wind. But she pushed forward anyway. Punishment disguised as practicality. She did not see the ice until it was too late. The wheelchair hit a slick patch at the top of a small ramp, and suddenly, everything was spinning. Alexandra felt herself tipping, felt the horrible helplessness of gravity betraying her, felt the impact as her shoulder and hip struck the frozen ground. Her phone skittered across the sidewalk, her purse spilled its contents into the snow, and she lay there, half tangled in her overturned chair, the cold seeping through her dress and into her bones. Getting up from a fall was complicated in the best circumstances. In the dark, in the snow, with no one around to help right the chair, it felt nearly impossible. Alexandra struggled to push herself upright, her bare hands burning against the ice, her dignity in shreds. Holy crap, did you see that? A group of young men had appeared from somewhere, 4 or 5 of them, bundled in expensive jackets with the swagger of those who had never known true hardship. Their leader, a sharp-faced young man with cruel eyes, was laughing. "Christmas miracle," he announced to his friends. "The cripple learned to fly." The others laughed, that pack mentality of cowardice disguised as humor. One of them pulled out his phone as though to film her. Another made a mocking motion of spinning invisible wheels. Alexandra felt hot shame flood her face. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the snow and cease existing. She kept trying to right her chair, her movements clumsy with cold and humiliation, while the laughter continued like broken glass. "Come on, get up," one of them called. "Put on a show." She was shaking now, from cold and from something deeper. This was the world she lived in. This was what people really thought when they looked at her. All the polite smiles were just masks for this contempt, this casual cruelty. "Daddy, she went that way. I saw her." Henry had made the decision to follow within seconds of Alexandra's departure. He knew that look in her eyes, had seen it in his own mirror on the worst nights. It was the look of someone drowning in assumptions about what they deserved. "We can't just let her go," Bonnie had said. And she was right. Whatever he had said, that hurt her. He needed to explain. She needed to understand. They heard the laughter before they saw the scene. Then they turned the corner, and Henry's blood ran cold. Alexandra was on the ground. Her wheelchair lay on its side beside her, and a group of young men stood over her like vultures, jeering and filming, treating her distress as entertainment. Something fundamental shifted in Henry Wells. He was not a violent man. He had never thrown a punch in his life. But in that moment, looking at those laughing faces, he understood what it meant to feel capable of anything. Bonnie moved before he could stop her. She broke into a run, her small boots pounding the icy sidewalk, and planted herself directly between Alexandra and her tormentors. "Stop laughing," she shouted, her 7-year-old voice ringing with righteous fury. "She's hurt. You're being mean." The young men blinked, momentarily stunned by this tiny defender. Then one of them, the leader, recovered his smirk. "Relax, kid. We're just joking. It's funny." Henry arrived then, dropping to his knees beside Alexandra first, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Your neck, your back, any serious pain?" "I'm fine," she whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. He helped her sit upright, then turned to face the young men. He stood slowly, deliberately, letting them see his full height, the breadth of his shoulders, the absolute stillness in his eyes. "You want to explain to me," he said, his voice low and controlled. "What's funny about a woman falling in the ice?" It's just a joke, man, one of them muttered, suddenly less sure. You don't get to laugh at someone for needing wheels to move. Henry took a step forward. The same way you don't get to laugh at someone for needing air to breathe. She didn't choose this. She doesn't deserve your cruelty. And if I ever see any of you treat another human being like entertainment again, I will make sure you understand exactly how unfunny it feels. The silence stretched, one by one. The young men looked away, shuffled their feet, muttered half-hearted apologies. Then they scattered into the night. Their bravado collapsed like a punctured balloon. Henry turned back to Alexandra, his expression softening. Let me help you up. Let me take you somewhere warm. He righted her wheelchair with careful hands, brushing off the snow, checking that nothing was broken. Then he helped her transfer back into the seat, supporting without controlling, letting her direct her own body while providing the stability she needed. Bonnie appeared at Alexandra's side and placed her red knit cap on Alexandra's head. Now we match, she said solemnly. Red and green, Christmas colors. Alexandra laughed despite everything, or perhaps because of it. The laugh came out broken and wet, more sob than joy. But it was real. They walked slowly through the quiet streets, Henry pushing her chair through the snow, Bonnie holding her hand. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, Henry broke the silence. Earlier, he said, when I said we can't save everyone, I wasn't talking about you as a project. Alexandra stiffened but did not pull away. I was teaching Bonnie that we can't fix the whole world, he continued, that we can't make every sad person happy or solve every problem, but we can be kind to whoever's in front of us. That's all I meant. You weren't Charity. You were just someone we wanted to know. I overheard, Alexandra admitted, and I assumed. You've earned the right to assume the worst. I understand that. But I need you to know that what happened tonight, dinner, the tree, all of it, that was real. I don't have room in my life for pity. I'm barely keeping my own head above water. I only make time for people I actually want to be around. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she said, I keep waiting for people to leave. My ex left. My friends left. Tonight I thought I'd beat you to it. I'm not going anywhere. Henry's voice was firm. Not tonight, at least. And my apartment is closer than wherever you live. And you're freezing. And Bonnie would never forgive me if I didn't offer you hot cocoa. With marshmallows, Bonnie added hopefully. Alexandra looked at the little girl, at the earnest father, at the Christmas lights twinkling in the distance. She thought about her empty apartment, her undecorated tree, the evening she had expected versus the evening she had received. Okay, she said, with marshmallows. Henry's apartment was small but immaculate, the kind of clean that came from a parent who had learned to control what little he could. The Christmas tree in the corner was modest, maybe 4 feet tall, decorated with ornaments that clearly had stories behind them, handmade paper stars, a photo ornament with Bonnie's baby picture, a glass angel with a chipped wing. Vivian loved Christmas, Henry said, catching Alexandra's gaze on a photograph of a smiling woman on the mantel. She used to say that decorations didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. They just had to mean something. She sounds wonderful. She was. She would have liked you. He made cocoa the old-fashioned way, heating milk on the stove, stirring in real chocolate. Bonnie curled up on the couch with her stuffed bear, already drowsy from the excitement of the evening. Alexandra accepted the warm mug with both hands, letting its heat seep into her frozen fingers. I'm sorry, she said, for assuming the worst about you. I'm sorry the world gave you reasons to. Henry sat down across from her, his own mug cradled in his palms. For what it's worth, I didn't see the chair first tonight. I saw you trying not to cry in a restaurant on Christmas Eve, and I saw a woman who deserved better than an empty seat across from her. Bonnie stirred, fighting sleep. Alexandra. Yes, sweetheart. Next Christmas, can we invite you again so you won't have to be alone? Alexandra's throat tightened. She looked at this child who had approached a crying stranger without fear, who had defended her against mockery without hesitation, who was now offering her a place in their small circle of two. I'd like that, she said. Maybe I can help decorate. I'm pretty good with colors. You can put the star on top, Bonnie decided. Daddy always lets me do it, but I can share. Henry caught Alexandra's eye over his daughter's head. Something unspoken passed between them, not romance exactly, but the possibility of it. The recognition that they had both survived losses that should have broken them, and that survival was easier with company. Later, when Bonnie had finally surrendered to sleep on the couch, Henry covered her with a blanket and joined Alexandra by the window. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white, softening all the hard edges of the world. Thank you, Alexandra said quietly, for following me, for standing up for me, for this. You turned our two-person Christmas into something better, Henry replied. That's not charity, that's gift. They stood there together, watching the snow. Two people who had learned that families were not always the ones you were born into. Sometimes they were the ones who found you at your worst and stayed anyway. Alexandra had entered the evening expecting to finally feel normal again. Instead, she had discovered something better. She had found people who did not need her to be anything other than what she was. Not brave, not inspiring, just a woman who deserved a seat at the table, a mug of cocoa in her hands, and a little girl who was already planning next year's Christmas. Outside the window. The first bells of midnight began to ring. Christmas Day had arrived, and for the first time in 3 years, Alexandra Moore was not spending it alone.